Hey everyone, and today we're going to be taking a look at the new Corsair Spec Omega 6. So they've made a few changes to it, glass, some RGB as well, although you can get a non-RGB for any of those out there of you that are already instantly triggered. Let's get in and chew the fat. Okay, as always with my case reviews, we start at the top and at the front. So, power switch, reset switch. You've got your front panel audio, you've got two USB 3s. Obviously that you need a USB 3 motherboard to be able to go with it and have the internal header, but most do nowadays if you're running new kit. You can see that we have a magnetic dust shield on the top, but it does also clean the lines up for the fan mounts underneath. Now, this is the first time I can be honest with you and say that I've ever seen, because you can get a decent 240mm radiator down here. There's loads of room for it, and it's offset, which is really nice as well. But you've only got one place really to put your 140mm. Sometimes you would have had a mount for one up here. Now it would be tight, I will admit, on the other side, you'll see in a minute. But the fact that they've not just stuck with 120s, I find quite challenging, because I wouldn't just have an individual 140 at the front on this case. The fact that they have it offset is a really good thing though, because what that does mean is without this offsetness, you wouldn't be able to run an AIO. But because of it, it does mean that you could fit any of the 120mm based AIO coolers on this. The only thing that you will need to be aware of is memory clearance. With Corsair LPX memory, you will get the clearance absolutely fine. But if you run anything any bigger, you'll run into issues. Now, if you look down here, in fact, I will change the camera for you because I'm such a gent. So we always do it. So you can see that we've got the Corsair LPX in there. Now, this will clear it. It's absolutely fine. It will go down there. I've got you on just the right sort of angle, so you can see the two memory sticks. But when the AIO goes in, it does miss it by about 3mm. So Corsair LPX is absolutely fine. Any bigger, literally anything else in their range won't fit. So you do need to keep that in mind. But the offset side of it, that's like that with every case. And it's better to have it offset and run, and it's not even small memory. You don't need to run a low profile or anything. You can still get your AIO cooling mount on the actual CPU absolutely fine. It's all fine for that. It's just, it needs to be over that few mil just to clear the memory at the very top of the motherboard. The only thing that you might run into is if you've got a MOSFET cooler at the very, very top of your board and it's massive, like ginormous. All normal motherboards will be absolutely fine. If you've got one of those ones with like super turbo heat sinks, and you might run into some issues. When we get on the inside, I'll show you in more depth. So I'm going to run around the case with you on the dolly or the Lazy Susan, whatever you would like to call it, and we will cover a few things on the way around. You do have lighting on the front here, and it's RGB. I will show you this lit up towards the end, because I know it does trigger people when I talk about RGBs, but I will show you that in depth and show you the modes and everything that it can do. You can see the lighting panel there, but the reason why we've taken the front off now is to show you the front. There is a dust filter. It's magnetic as well. It's white to match the case. You can see you've got really fine mesh there. It comes with 120mm fan in the front. There is another one in the exhaust, and that is all of the fans that you get with the case. They're both black, no RGB on them at all. There's room to fit a 360 in the front if you wish, and you can, with a push, get the H150i in the front as well. I would personally say that if it was me, I'd probably run my AIO in the front just because of the offset nature, but you can still have it in the roof. Don't forget, if you have it in the roof, you're going to be exhausting the heat straight out the top. If you have it in the front, you are going to be getting some CPU heat going in that way. It's going to be up to you which way you want to swing with it. Also going to depend on your GPU and the way that sort of swings as well. Have a play with the config. Don't be afraid to take it away from one place and put it in the other place and play with it, and that's not what she said, but it's more of a case of if you want to change it around, you can do some thermal tests, play some games, do some benchmarks, see which works for your individual kit, because there is no hard and fast rule. I quite often end up going for the way that looks the best, but if I was going to be doing something that I wanted to be ridiculously cool and quiet, that would be the way I'd go about it. You can see how easy it is to put that a dust filter on the front. There is also a plastic kind of shroud around the outside of the front here, which does just clean the lines up a little bit when it's on. And there is air vents down the side, because that's how it's stood off so that the inside can breathe. There is also vents down the bottom as well. This shows up better when the lights are on. You do have a smoked tempered glass side panel, so it is glass, so it is going to add a bit of price to it. Round the back, normal kind of 7-slot layout, but you do have a slot over here that you could put a vertical graphics card in if you wanted to. It doesn't have any mounts or anything down the bottom, but you could mount your GPU in that way and then just buy your own riser cable off of Amazon or something like that. But there isn't any like screw mounts or anything to put anything like dedicated Corsair going on in here. Also, round the back, something strange that you can see here, and this is a lighting controller for the RGB. So you've actually got it on the outside of the case, so you can basically just put your hand around the back and change the settings on the fly without having to open the case. This is kind of good, so you don't have to keep taking the back panel off or anything like that, and it will just make things a lot easier. The fact that they've actually thought of this and it comes with it cabled this way, I think is a great step forward rather than it having to be a pain in the bum. I do also kind of think it might have been nicer that if we had like a switch or something up on the front, but then I've got to be honest about it. You know, the idea is great, but then it would have taken up real estate for extra switches. Extra switches then mean extra value, it increases costs. It does turn into a bit of a pain in the bottom once you start talking about that sort of stuff, when it is actually quite easy just to plonk it around the back, because you're probably not going to change it very often. Right, so this is the rear of the case. There's plenty of room here for decent length power supplies. This is a 180mm length power supply here, and I've got it in here with custom cables, and there is still room to move. It does get tight around the mechanical hard drive bay, which is here. You can put 2 mechanical hard drives in the bottom if you like. You can also remove that bay entirely. I've actually found it to be a really nice spot to keep the cables all tucked in there and out the way. But like I said, you can remove it. There's 2 removable and tool-free, at least tool-free to remove them. You will need to put the screws in solid-state drive bays there. But you can see that there's a little indent here, and this goes through to the other side. Now what this means is you can mount solid-state drives on the other side in the visible section of the case, and this little indentation area here is where you put your cables through. I will show you this in a sec, but I think this is actually a pretty cool way, and it's a really nice way to use up the space as well. So I kind of like this. You've got a couple of grommets down the side, plenty of tying points. As you can see, we've clipped cables up all over the place. There's tying points underneath this, You've got some over here, they're up around the side. There's literally tying points everywhere. You need to remember, look, there's an awful lot of cables in this, and it's just all been made kind of nice and tidy. Now I know this is a big bunch of cables, but I don't think this actually looks too bad. Specifically use white and black as well, so that you can see that there's quite a lot going on. But it does look kind of cool, and you can also see there is a gap at the front here, from the front of the case to the start of the hard drive cage, and you'll see that's where you can put your AIO in a second in the front if you end up wanting to go down that far with like a 360mm, for example. When we get round to the other side, there are 4 thumb screws. Now these thumb screws have little slotted tops on them, like normal flathead screws, but you can, or they do actually come with Allen headed bolts as well. The fact that they send you both I find kind of perplexing, but it's also a really good thing, because sometimes these can be a bit of a pain. Now these you can take off by hand. The Allen bolt ones, you have to use an Allen key for them. And randomly, they even send an Allen key with the case for you to be able to do it with. I like the idea that they sent both. I kind of don't understand why they did. I did say to you about a solid state drive though, and I did have it on the side, and now I'm looking around like an idiot behind the camera because I can't find it. Woohoo! Found it. Right, so solid state drive, like I said, you can mount up at the back, but you need to remember that one of them is going to be upside down if you have 2 identical ones. You can get them in there. The cables can be a little bit tight. One thing I would say is when it comes to your SATA cables, sometimes you have daisy chain SATA cables. If you're going to use one of these for on this, make sure you use the very top one, and not one of the ones that's underneath with the cables that kind of flow around, and you'll find it easier to put in, because otherwise you're going to end up with like double bunches of cables over here. I would, like I said, just use the individual one to go to either one. It is going to make more mess, but you've not got a mirrored panel, sorry, a glass panel on the back, so it's not going to matter too much. But it does really, you know, it can, let's face it, solid state drives, they're still not cheap. You can put one of these on display quite easily. I think it's a lovely, lovely idea. If you don't want to have them on the front of your case like that, the mounts are still the same. You're just going to have the screws on the other side. You can easily do it that way. Just, I wouldn't put the cables through so that you can see it on the other side. Just a personal thing. So like I said, you have got room in the front to be able to put a radiator. Now, you can easily get a 360mm in the front if you want. You can put a 280 in there as well if you want. You can get up to about 35 to 40mm thick radiator in there. I would personally say this is really going to be only any good for an AIO sort of all-in-one loop radiator to go in the front, but it does support the new Corsair H50i, which is a 360mm model. But because of that, it supports all the other 360mm models as well, so you can use whatever one you want. The other thing that I did say to you about with the inside of the case as we move around so that we can get a look was the offset nature of everything in the roof. Now, there's no easy way for me to be able to show you this, but if I put a solid state drive up, there's that much clearance pretty much to the top. I'd still be able to screw an AIO in. What you do need to remember is an AIO does kind of poke out a little bit. Once the screw goes in, it does go out a little bit. So it does just skim the very top of the RAM, and it really is just the very top, because you've got say 30mm for the radiator, and then you've got 25mm for the fans, and that's literally on some boards just the top of the memory. But there is no standard place to put the memory. Some boards have them a bit lower, some boards have them a bit higher, so it will just skim it, it will clear it absolutely fine. You can get an AIO in there with ease. The other thing is, like I did say to you about the big heat sinks on this side, well, heat sinks inherently are going to be shorter than most memory, but if you've got massive, great big tall heat sinks, then it may become an issue. I can't really give you any exacting numbers, but there are very few boards out there nowadays with massive, gigantic heat sinks, so you're not really going to have to worry. The other thing that we do need to talk about as I'm tightening the stand up is you've got a vent here for the power supply if you want to run it upwards, as I've got mine wired in, but there is a dust filter in the bottom as well, so you don't really need to worry about it. Could you see? Yes, you could. I forgot to flip the camera around. The other thing is you do have a pass through here. Some people put their PCI Express cables up. I still like to put mine down the side. It keeps it nice and clean. We've put the cables for the front panel in on this so that you've got you can see it being used basically. There is also another pass-through up right at the very front of the case. If I tip it this way, you'll be able to see it. That's normally going to be for your audio cables, for like maybe the front panel, or depending on whether you're going to be running like sound cards and stuff. There's a couple of places that you can route stuff up there through. Please don't use it to put your 8-pin cable up for the motherboard. If I zoom you out again, so that we can see, please don't use it to pass the 8-pin up through here for the motherboard. The 8-pin CPU power goes down the back of the case just so that we can keep things all tidy. So you can see you can build a really nice, simple, tidy rig in this. We've got AMD stuff going on here. This is a X64. So you can see it all fits in. It's all lovely. You can get up to over a 300mm graphics card in here, but it's going to depend on your cooling setup in the front. So if you have an AIO, it's going to be a little bit less. This is a Strix graphics card, and we could easily, with the Strix, get a 360mm RAD in the front and the graphics card, and it's all going to fit. It's all going to be lovely. So the Strix is actually before the cutout on the side, so you're going to get a really good idea on the lengths that you can get going on in here. If you did want to get maybe the fan maybe a bit closer to your graphics card and you're not going to have an AIO in the front, you can actually buy shrouds to kind of space them out a little bit. Although, to be honest with you, I think you're probably overthinking matters then. You're probably better off changing the fan so you've got a faster spinning, quieter, long-term use fan than moving things over and all that sort of thing. Temperature-wise, the fans, they're all right, they're not great, but it did a really good job. The problem with when you start giving temperatures is you need to use the exact same kit in every single case, and when you do MATX cases and ITX cases, you can't really get around with doing that. And it's also going to depend on whether do you run them at 12 volts, do you run them at 9, do you run them at 7, do you test all of them. I quite often flick between using AMD CPUs and Intel CPUs, and I change with motherboards. So to be honest with you, if you want better airflow, you just change the fans out. You're going to be doing that sort of thing. I know a lot of people are just going to clip it in and forget about it, but those people really aren't going to care about the bulk of stuff anyway. We built it so it could look nice. So one thing I'm going to show you now just quickly are the lighting panels at the front. Now you can change them all with the switches on the back. You can make it do one thing if you want. You make it cycle through a few. I'm just going to flick it on so that you can see some of the lighting, and it will cycle through all of them. So it will cycle through those. It will give you a better idea about what's possible for you at home if you were to just pick one. Okay, so the lights are going to run in the background, and you'll see me changing some of the modes at the start. So you'll see the initial ones that are white, you can set those to whatever colour that you want. Then when you see it start to change on its own, that's literally going through a whole batch of pretty much everything. You can still set the animated, you can set the flashing, you can set it static. You've got loads of options with the 3 switches at the back. I'd suggest that you literally just have, take some time, turn the lights off and see what works for you the best. You might just want it a single colour. One thing to note though, is you can get the case with and without RGB. So it's £75 without RGB, and you can either get a black one with red lights or a white one with white lights, or you can pay £85, so £10 more, and you can get the RGB set up in the front. It doesn't come with any RGB lights, RGB fans on the inside though, so if you were that way inclined, you would still need to grab yourself a couple of whatever ones that you want. The good side of it, because a lot of people are like, oh, why has it not got RGB fans inside? Well, Corsair actually do like 3 or 4 different types now. They all look a bit different, and they're all actually quite cool. So by leaving them out, essentially what they're doing is they're letting you decide what ones you want, rather than forcing you into the ones that, let's face it, that would be cheapest, so they can put them inside the case. So at least that way you can get a full set that match, in case you might want a set on your new AIO that you might buy with the case, or you might have a big air cooler and you want the fans to match. Do you know what I mean? It's going to be completely down to you, but at least they've done that way, and they've given you a bit of choice. Price wise, some people are going to say for this sort of size case, and the fact that it's called a spec, you are always going to think that it's going to be slightly cheaper. I would agree, but putting tempered glass onto any case adds cost, because glass, although they're doing a lot more of it now, it's still not the cheapest thing in the world to get hold of. So you do kind of need to, you know, remember that when they do these nice things and add the nice sides onto them, there's always going to be a kick-off at some point with the value. I've looked into doing one-offs with glass, and it's ridiculous. I think that they're paying around sort of $15 for a side panel. Just, you know, that's their cost for it. So when you think about that, add that into the fact of 75 or an 85 quid case, break it down, you can see that by adding it on, yes, it does look nice. The only way that they'd be able to do another one would be to have another SKU with a plastic side on it, which, let's face it, well, the same people that are going to moan about the tempered glass price are going to be the same people that are going to moan that plastic scratches. At the end of the day, of course plastic's going to scratch. It's plastic. If plastic didn't scratch, the front of our phones would be plastic as well. So, you know, there's always going to be a trade-off, and that's my point. It's a great little case though. They've done some really nice bits with it, namely 2 points that stick out for me. One is the fact that they actually put the lighting controller on the back, so it's outside the case, so you can get to it easily. If you've ever had to go through the hassle of having to open the case, that also means, and this is the critical point, that you do not need to run software to be able to change the lights on the front. That is critical. You don't need to run soft with that. So I know a lot of people don't. I know a lot of people might not want to have like extra USBs and everything going on. If you want to hook it all up to your system, yeah, you're going to have to buy other bits to be able to hook it up and have it all matching. But by the time you've bought fans and you've got the controller and stuff like that, that's just going to plug into it. So you don't, excuse me, you don't really need to overthink it too much. You can also technically get rid of the controller if you don't want it, and you're going to go the software route and get rid of it off the back of the case as well if you want. So there's a few things for you to think about there. The other thing is that AIO mount in the roof, they've offset it a little bit so that you can put one in. That's brilliant, because above the motherboard there would have been no room. You could, in certain scenarios, just about get a fan over there, but when you talk to a 140mm fan right over in that far corner where your I/O shield is, with some of the motherboards now that have got an I/O cover, like the one that I'm running here, and like many of them out there that you guys are going to be running at home, that cover can stop you being able to get a screw in, and sometimes it really is only the screw head that can be the difference. So by doing it this way and not having the 140 in the back, it removes any issues, any sort of little gripes. I personally wouldn't have had a 140mm mount in the roof. It's all just because if it's not on one side, my OCD doesn't want it on the other. So that's something that I was a bit like, I don't get that. Maybe they can explain to me why you might want a 140 in the front and not in the back. I don't get it. But that's it. That's me being super picky. It's just literally super picky, trying to find something wrong with it. But other than that, award wise, it gets the OC3D approved. It's got a few caveats, all cases are going to. For the money, it's really going to depend whether you want to pay an extra £10 for the RGB. But like I said, don't forget, they do give you the choice, so that if you do like the RGB and you want to have it all synced up, you've got the lighting node and everything there, and you could technically have the fans running off that. So there's a couple of little things that you can play around with. But other thing is, excuse me, I've got a bit of a bad chest at the moment, I'm asthmatic. If you don't like RGB, and a lot of people don't, and you just fancy white or red lights in the front, you can save yourself a tenner and then go about your day getting your normal normal LED, not RGB fans throughout the rest of the case, which, if I'm honest, that's probably what I would do, because I like white LEDs on the inside of my case. I actually run white MLs in my rig, so that's why I said it. So yeah, it's completely up to you. Good layout, get 360mm on the front. If you want, you can get another 240mm in the roof. I can't see it being that great for a full water cooling loop, not for the mass market. If you're one of those guys that's going to pack all your reservoirs and pumps and stuff in the bottom, you definitely could do, but you know, yeah, I don't know. Anyway, so couple of really nice options for you there. Nice lighting on the front. It's probably going to divide opinion based on price and the lighting anyway, but that is where the YouTube comments all come underneath. I will keep an eye. We can have a good old debate. If you are interested though, you can come and have a proper one-on-one conversation with me on the OC3D forums, because we do all have a good conflab. I'm sure some of the members will tell you I can get a little bit heated when we start having some good debates, but it's all good and healthy banter among technology friends. So this has been Tiny Tom Logan with the Corsair Spec 06 out, and I've not done this for a while. Ding. Have two for luck.